hi. Thank you for meeting with us tonight.
No problem. Let me just put this up over here.
Okay.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
We got to tour your lovely recording studio the other day, and I thought I would bring you back live for our segment about who are the people in our neighborhood
Okay.
who use Steam. And who better than a musician to tell us about Steam? So why don't you introduce yourself first of all?
So my name is David Randolph.
Randolph. That sounds familiar.
Very familiar.
I know him. Okay. Anyway, Mr. Randolph. So we were talking about STEAM education and science, technology, engineering, math, and of course art, which is the music itself. How do musicians use STEAM around your studio? We saw like several different devices yesterday and chords and things that I don't even know what they do. So talk to us a little bit about the science in your work, in the technology and engineering and math that you use.
Okay. So in a recording studio or a movie studio environment, there's a lot of engineering that goes into it. So you have to have a little bit of physics. You need to know a little bit about electronics. You need to know some math. For example, I've got all these panels hanging on me, or not on me, but hanging around me.
Yeah.
And those, I designed those to help absorb the sound in the room so that it was more suitable to be a little tiny recording studio. You don't want sound bouncing around and echoing. If you walk into an empty room and clap your hands and you hear it sort of ringing and going dig-dig-dig-dig, then that's not a good environment to try to make recordings in. And so I've used some of my physics knowledge about sound to really improve that in here. And then, one thing I learned early on in my music career is that music equipment breaks and it costs money to repair. And so I decided that maybe it would be in my best interests to learn, enough electronics that I can diagnose and repair my equipment. And occasionally I've actually built a few pieces of equipment too, and that's fun, but that's not really my strong point. But having that knowledge is really helpful.
I know that you fix amplifiers. I've seen you take them apart, and
I do.
There's soldering involved and like really real physical engineering happening, as well as just the sound engineering that you described in your studio.
Yeah. And you need to learn how to read a schematic, and you got to learn how to do all that stuff safely, because you can blow a finger off or worse if you're not careful. I mean, guitar amps have 400 or 500 volts running around inside of them. So you've got to learn how electricity actually works and how you can interact with it safely.
How you can be safe. I know you've played. There've been some gigs that you've played where they're outdoor gigs, and water is a very big concern for musicians when playing outdoors.
When you're plugged into electronic equipment, you don't really want to have water lying.
No, you don't. All right. And then you talked about math, too. There's a lot of math just in the music itself.
Yeah, I mean, music in some levels, there's the art level of it, but there's also sort of the classical level of it, right? Which is a lot of math if you get right down to it. There's rhythms, there's intervals, there's, all kind of adjustments to intervals, like you've got sharp and flat intervals, and so you've got to be able to quickly figure out, okay, well, if I'm on this note and I need to go up a minor third, I got to go up however many half steps to get there. So having just some basic understanding of math is very helpful.
So a lot of mental math, it sounds like. You can't just stop and calculate those things in the middle of the song. So
right, you have to be able to do it on the fly.
And I know we talked about time signatures as well. That's something that musicians use to vary up the rhythm of the song. Yeah,
the time signature sets. I mean, it kind of determines how it's going to feel. So like a 4/4 time signature, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's most music on the radio, but
yes.
Also 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You've got different, and then you've got like polyrhythms, like 3/2, right? So there's all kind of interesting interesting little math problems to be dealt with in rhythms and time.
All right. So, as a musician, well, we're a STEAM curriculum company, so we have a course written specifically about musicians and about the music industry. It's called Backstage Pass.
Right.
It's great. The kids get to experiment with a
I helped with that.
Yes, with venue, with sound engineering, with stage design, with even down to logistics of packing and taking your show on the road in larger venues and smaller venues. So a lot of math and a lot of all these great STEAM activities involved in Backstage Pass. But I just wanted to know, as a musician, if you could write a course for kids, what kind of course would you write?
I don't know that I would write a new course. I might update something though. So when I was in school, you went to music class 5 days a week, K through 5th grade, and then in 6th grade you had the option to go into band or choir, or if music just really wasn't your thing. But I would bring that back. I think we've really lost something by having 1 day a week music classes, or optional music classes. I think that having half an hour, 45 minutes a day of that part of your brain being exercised, I think that's an important thing. And I might update it. When I was a kid, it was the 70s, and we were using educational theory from the 50s probably still. And it was, I don't know that it was fun for everybody. I always enjoyed it because I like music, but there's probably better ways to teach the music class at that level. Maybe instead of making everybody do the same thing, give people options. Break off into little groups and do things, right? Instead of maybe everybody having to do the same thing all the time. But at its essence, that's what I would put back in the curriculum.
Awesome. And that's so true with budget cuts and with all the things that teachers have to squeeze in, even just during the day. Sometimes it's not possible to have music class every day.
Yeah.
And you did touch on the fact that music does stimulate parts of our brain that help with memory retention, that help with problem solving, critical thinking skills. Music is something that there's research that proves that music can affect the outcome of those thinking processes in a positive way.
Yeah, well, in my real job is in technology.
Yes.
And some of the best computer programmers are also pretty accomplished musicians.
It's interesting how those go together.
Yeah, and it's been proven that there's, I don't know all the science behind it, but there's definitely a link between the part of your brain that can process music and the part of your brain that can spit out, computer code and handle heavy technological problems.
Interesting. Good point. Excellent point. All right. Well, let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about inventions. You have a lot of musical equipment, as we were able to see.
Yes.
I didn't open the closet yesterday because there's even more musical equipment in there. Different instruments, different amplifiers. You have a guitar pad or guitar pedals on the floor. You have things I don't even know what they are. But, there has to be something. If you could have someone invent something for you as a musician, what would that thing be?
So there's one little tiny, almost seemingly insignificant thing that could be invented. So if you look back here, this thing with all the little silver knobs is a guitar amp.
Yes.
And you'll notice there's a knob missing right here.
Yes.
Okay. What happens is when you're carrying your equipment back and forth to gigs and loading it in and out of trucks in the middle of the night, you break the knobs off the guitar amps. It's happened to everybody I know that I've ever met has had at least one guitar amp knob knocked off. Some guitar amps are designed to where it's easier to knock them off. Like this one, it's pretty easy to knock them off. That's not the first one I've knocked off. There's actually one or two on the back. If somebody could invent a guitar knob potentiometer that was designed to break away and be reattached, you could still use it normally, but if it got hit too hard, it would pop off and you just stick it back on. That would be an amazing invention. It would save, hundreds of of hours of time out of every musician's life with having to deal with getting their amp fixed. I know, like, this particular amp is not real friendly toward having the knobs broken off as far as repairing it goes, which is why I haven't done it. Is I don't want to take that. It's going to take me at least an hour, if not more, because of how much stuff I have to take apart to get to the knob inside and get it put back on. So that would be an incredible invention and would really benefit humanity.
So something just as small as a knob.
Yep.
Then, and you have to take that entire amplifier apart, right, to repair that.
Yes, and there's wires everywhere, and sometimes, and again, some amps, like I've got another one, there's a little bitty guy down here next to kind of down there in the middle. That one's easy. If I knock a knob off that, it's maybe 5-10 minutes to get it replaced, right? It's real easy to get to, but this other one is somewhat of a nightmare to do that with. So it's the little things it's little inventions that really make the big difference sometimes.
That's true. Very good point.
Now, fortunately, this one is broken off in a way that you can still grab the stump and turn it, so it's still very usable. And so again, I'm like, well, maybe I don't need to, but I have another amp somewhere that had one sheared clean off, and you can't operate that knob at all. And I'm gonna have to take that one apart and fix it. So anyway, that's what I
there's larger amps than what you have.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well, I don't know. That
pretty
one's pretty big.
Okay.
There's some, but not many.
Okay. All right. Well, let me ask you this. There's the hot topic today that people are talking about is AI, artificial intelligence, and great things about it, but also some kind of scary things about AI and its uses and its potential uses. I'm just wondering, as a musician, how do you envision AI being utilized? I mean, it already is being utilized in some capacities, but is AI an asset or a detriment to the music industry?
So I think AI is a tool.
Okay.
I think, like money and hammers and axes and all kind of other things that we have, it's a tool, and how you use it is going to determine, like, whether it's good or bad. So that said, I think one of the first things where people's brain goes is, oh, it's going to, they're just going to have computers generate all the music and there won't be any need for musicians. And I don't really buy into that. Drum machines came around. Oh, it's going to put drummers out of work. Well, it really didn't put drummers out of work. In fact, some drummers found they had more work because they could get hired to program the machines to actually sound like drummers, right? And in some cases, like in my studio here, I'm in a tiny room. I don't play drums. I got no place to put a drummer, right? I can't afford studio time, so I'm not going to go buy studio time and hire a drummer anyway. I'm not putting anybody out of business, right? Because if I wasn't able to use the drum machine, I would just do something else, right? I would just do without drums and figure out how to ground it. But as it stands, I have some drum software that was developed and actually uses samples played by real drummers, and real drummers get paid when I buy these things. And so, technology is a tool. As far as AI goes, well, let me back up. So the next thing I wanted to point out is that, if a human creates compelling art, people will want to consume that art, whether it's visual art or music or kinetic art, performances. If you create something compelling, people will want to see it. Now, if you don't create something compelling, you're on your own, right? If you're putting out boring product, well, nobody wants to see or hear that. They're going to go to the AI first, right? But if the human is doing something that is interesting to the other humans, they're going to want to interact and engage with that art, right? Now, where I think we're going to see a heavy proliferation of AI music is in top 40 radio. And I think top 40 radio is an awful thing in general. the way it's structured, the way it basically cuts out artists, like the days of being able to sort of be a minor star or a minor artist and still get radio play are just about gone. There's a few places that still happens, but Top 40 Radio is not one of those places. And I think probably just because of the nature of the thing, and because it's an industry that is concerned with creation of product and doing it cheaper and cheaper, I think AI has a good chance of taking over large sections or large swaths of Top 40 Radio. Now, this is just my opinion, but that's where I see it happening. Since I don't listen to it, I'm not going to be affected by it, right?
Right.
But and a lot of musicians won't. I know I listen to tons of music. 99% of it does not show up on the radio anywhere. It does not happen, right? And I know, like, I was on a little road trip earlier this week for work with a coworker, and he was playing me a lot of music that he listens to that I'd never heard, and some of it I really liked, and I was like, well, I haven't heard this, but now that I have, I will seek it out, right? And at some point, maybe I'll go see those bands live. I might buy a record, buy a shirt and support them or whatever. But there will always be the human musician, right? It's wired into our DNA. We've been playing music for thousands of years, and just because AI comes along, we're not going to stop.
Yeah, true. You brought up a couple of things that resonated with me. You talked about your, using drum tracks and using recordings of and blending that into your music. Makes me think of musicians who are technically one-person bands, and how they still either hire live musicians when they go out on the road, or I believe you told me a story one time about an experience you had where they didn't.
Yeah. So many years ago, Vanilla Ice came to Denton, Texas to play a show. And at the time, there was this piece of equipment called a digital audio tape machine, a DAT machine.
A DAT, yeah.
And I had a DAT because, I've had a studio for 1,000 years now. And I happened to know the club owners. So Vanilla Ice showed up to the club, and one of his DAT machines was down, and he was not going to play. He wasn't going to set up and play unless there was a second one on hand in case something went wrong. And so the club owner knew me, called me up. I brought my DAT machine up to the club and saved the Vanilla Ice show, for better or worse, in Denton, Texas, back in whenever that was, a long time ago. But as part of it, they were like, you can stay here, you can watch the show, free drinks, whatever you want. You're our hero, you're VIP tonight. So I stuck around for the sound check, and after that, it was enough, and I went home. But the interesting thing was there weren't musicians involved in this. There was Vanilla Ice, who is, he's technically a musician. He's a rapper, and that's definitely a valid art form.
Absolutely.
But it was him and the DAT machines, right? And then lights and his dancing. He may have had a dancer or two with him. I don't remember if he had dancers with him or not, but there were no live musicians on that show, right? It was all pre-recorded tracks.
So did you stop, collaborate, and listen?
I stopped and I listened. I didn't really collaborate. I went home.
I had to ask.
And just to finish the story, I had been working on a mix of a song I wrote to submit to a contest, and I needed my DAT, and the owners went out of town for 2 weeks the next morning, and I had to go rent a DAT to finish my own mix to submit to this contest. So it was, which I didn't win, but anyway. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So it was quite the experience.
Well, then, and we've been to see bands who have, like I said, they have one person that records all the different tracks, but you can't be in 12 places at once on stage, so they hire studio musicians to come in and fill in for them, or they hire touring musicians to take those spots. Yeah. Very cool. And again, all this is baked into our unit Backstage Pass. Really cool stuff for the kids to learn about, whether they're, planning on being a part of the music business or not. There's a lot of applications for, I know one in particular, we talk about sales. David, you were talking about musicians getting paid for some of the drum tracks, even though they're not here playing with you, they have recorded on these drum tracks, and they're receiving royalties every time somebody is utilizing that system. And the music industry has changed a lot with MP3 downloads and with streaming music.
Yeah.
Less and less people are purchasing, things that, we grew up with vinyl albums, and kids in the 80s had cassette tapes, and then we morphed into CDs, and now we're just streaming individual songs. So everybody complains about the high price of concert tickets, but really that's where musicians are making up some of that revenue lost to.
Yeah, most musicians will never see any significant amount of money for streams, because you have to get thousands of them to make a penny.
Right. And
Right.
so those live gigs are important to those small musicians that are up and coming, as well as the larger musicians who, the Taylor Swifts and Beyoncés who are on tour. And
Now, I think some of it's ridiculous between the some prices, but like to the thing about like records, records used to be dirt cheap.
yes.
There was a time when you could get a record for $1 because nobody wanted a record, right? And now records are not cheap. Like, I bought a box set not too long ago that was pretty pricey, and even just going down to Walmart and picking up an album, because I like vinyl. We
Yes.
vinyl here. But that, part of it is that vinyl has to be like, they can't make up for quantity. They can't have an economy of scale selling the vinyl and selling the CDs anymore because of the streaming, right? So that economy of scale goes away.
Right. And these are lessons too. Again, that's a real math of money lesson for kids to learn about the music industry too.
Yep.
And of course there's merch, you got to have your t-shirts and your
Mm-hmm.
posters. We have quite the collection here, I know, of posters. That's posters and knickknacks and things. Yes. So awesome. Well, thank you again for speaking with us. Oh, and speaking of merch, would you like to show your beautiful guitar, Miss B?
Okay. Well, actually, Miss B's in the room with you, hanging on the wall.
Oh, is she? Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Well, we won't get to look at Miss B today. She's pictured, and I took a picture of her when I walked around.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, that guitar is actually a part of an art series of guitars by a guitarist named Adam Jones.
Mm-hmm.
So there will be 7 guitars in that series, right?
Yep.
And we have 2.
2 of them.
So very cool. All right. Well, thank you for talking to us again.
You're welcome.
And thank you for talking to us, especially about how you use STEAM in our neighborhood and in your everyday life. And I probably am going to see you soon.
Probably so. Maybe on the couch in about 5 minutes.
Maybe so. All right. Well,
All right.
have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. And that was Life of a Musician Who Uses STEAM. So tune in next week, and I'll have someone else on my segment to talk to us about how they use STEAM in their daily lives. And if you're interested in Backstage Pass, just give any of us a shout here at NuMinds in Richmond. We're happy to help you out and show you how wonderful a curriculum it is and how easy it is for teachers to use. All right, thank you.